In August 2015, two men walked into a law office in Wałbrzych, Poland, claiming they'd found something that historians had been searching for since 1945. They said they knew the exact location of a Nazi gold train, supposedly hidden in a network of tunnels beneath the Owl Mountains. The train, according to local legend, had vanished in the final days of World War II, packed with looted treasure from Breslau, now the Polish city of Wrocław. But these men weren't after gold. They were after what witnesses claimed was in the final car, something the Nazis had tried desperately to bury along with their secrets. The story begins in January 1945, when the Soviet Red Army was advancing rapidly toward Breslau. The city, one of Germany's largest industrial centers, was about to become a battlefield. Nazi officials ordered an immediate evacuation of anything valuable: art, gold reserves, documents, and according to some accounts, experimental materials from nearby research facilities. Trains leaving the city in those final weeks were reportedly so heavy they required extra locomotives. One of these trains allegedly entered a tunnel system near the town of Wałbrzych and simply disappeared. For 70 years, treasure hunters searched the mountains. The tunnels were real enough. The Nazis had used forced labor to dig them as part of Project Reese, a massive underground complex whose purpose remains partially classified in German archives. But no one could find the train. Then came the 2015 claim, backed by ground-penetrating radar images that showed what looked like a long metallic object buried beneath the earth. The Polish government took the claim seriously enough to issue an official statement. Deputy Culture Minister Piotr Zuchowski announced that the radar images were 99% certain to show a train. Within days, international media descended on Wałbrzych. The small town became the center of a modern treasure hunt, with reporters, historians, and amateur prospectors crowding the streets. What made this particular search different was a document that surfaced shortly after the announcement. A man named Andreas Richter, living in Germany, came forward with his father's deathbed confession. Richter's father had been a German soldier assigned to guard duty in the Wałbrzych area in early 1945. According to the confession, he'd helped seal a train into a tunnel, but he refused to describe what was inside the final car. He told his son only that it wasn't gold, and that it should stay buried. The two men who made the initial claim, a Pole named Piotr Koper and a German named Andreas Richter, apparently unrelated to the confessor, requested a 10% finder's fee for any treasure recovered. They provided GPS coordinates and detailed maps. The Polish military sent in mine clearance teams, warning that the area could be booby-trapped with explosives. Historical records showed that Nazi engineers had indeed rigged portions of the tunnel system with demolition charges. Excavation began in August 2016. Teams used specialized equipment to probe the earth without triggering potential explosives. The site was cordoned off, and the operation was broadcast live on Polish television. Thousands of people watched as excavators slowly removed layers of soil and rock. The atmosphere was tense. Every shovelful could reveal either treasure or tragedy. After 3 days of digging, the teams found nothing. No train, no gold, no mysterious final car. The radar images, upon closer examination by independent experts, showed geological formations that could easily be mistaken for metallic objects. The supposed tunnel entrance was just a collapsed mine shaft. The treasure hunters quietly withdrew their claims, though Koper later insisted the train existed but was in a different location than they'd initially believed. But the story doesn't end with an empty hole in the ground. Researchers examining Nazi documents declassified in the 1990s discovered references to something called the Breslau Evacuation Manifest. The manifest listed items removed from the city in January and February 1945, including standard valuables like paintings and gold bars, but several entries were redacted, marked only with classification codes that corresponded to SS scientific operations. Breslau was home to several research institutions during the war. One of them, operating under the cover name Institute for Hereditary Research, was actually conducting experiments that violated the Geneva Conventions. Documents from the Nuremberg trials mention materials from this institute being evacuated, but the destination was listed as secure location, southwestern sector. The Owl Mountains were in the southwestern sector. A historian named Joanna Lamparska spent years cross-referencing railway schedules with SS movement orders. She found evidence of a train departing Breslau on February 9, 1945. That doesn't appear in any of the standard evacuation records. The train's manifest, if it ever existed, has never been found, but eyewitness accounts from Polish civilians living near Wałbrzych describe seeing a train enter the mountains in mid-February, guarded by SS troops who threatened to shoot anyone who came near. One witness, interviewed in 1947 by Polish authorities, described seeing the train's final car. It wasn't a standard cargo car. It was a modified passenger car with reinforced walls and no windows. She remembered it clearly because SS guards were wearing protective masks while working near it, which seems strange for a car supposedly containing gold or artwork. The protective masks detail appears in 3 separate witness statements from 1947, all given independently to different investigators. The statements weren't connected until a researcher named Marek Przybylski compiled them in 2001. He noted that standard protocol for handling hazardous materials in 1945 would have required both masks and protective suits, but the witnesses only described masks. This suggested either improper safety procedures or materials that weren't considered extremely dangerous by the standards of the time. What could require masks, but not full protective gear? Medical waste was one possibility. The SS Institute in Breslau had allegedly conducted experiments on prisoners from nearby labor camps, but medical waste wouldn't require the level of secrecy suggested by the classified manifest entries. Another possibility was radioactive material. The German nuclear program had several facilities in the region, and early radiation safety protocols often involved only respiratory protection. Polish authorities conducted soil testing around the suspected tunnel sites in 2017. They found elevated levels of mercury and arsenic, consistent with industrial pollution from wartime mining operations. But in one location, about 3 kilometers from where the treasure hunters had dug, they found trace amounts of thorium, a radioactive element used in early atomic research. The thorium concentrations were higher than natural background levels, but not dangerous enough to require site cleanup. The thorium discovery reignited speculation. Germany's nuclear program had been more advanced than Allied intelligence initially believed. After the war, American teams found evidence of reactor experiments and uranium enrichment operations scattered across German territory. Some materials were never accounted for. The possibility that radioactive materials were hidden in the Owl Mountains isn't far-fetched. The Allies spent years searching for missing German uranium stockpiles. But there's another explanation that's more disturbing than radioactive waste. In 2019, a historian named Gregor Pawłowski published research based on Soviet military records declassified by Russia. According to these records, Soviet troops entering the Wałbrzych area in May 1945 reported finding a sealed tunnel with human remains outside the entrance. The remains were in German uniforms, and the cause of death was listed as asphyxiation. The Soviets dynamited the tunnel entrance and filed a report classifying the site as a potential biological hazard zone. Asphyxiation suggests several possibilities. The Germans could have sealed themselves in the tunnel accidentally, or they could have been killed by gas released from whatever was stored inside. German forces did use poison gas stocks during evacuations, though typically only to destroy their own chemical weapons before they fell into enemy hands. But the biological hazard classification suggests the Soviets suspected disease agents, not chemical weapons. The SS Institute in Breslau had a division that studied infectious diseases. Official records claim the research was defensive, developing vaccines and treatments for troops. But testimony from survivors suggests the work went beyond defensive measures. If disease samples or infected tissue specimens were being evacuated from Breslau, they would require sealed transport and armed guards. They would also explain why the car had no windows and why guards wore masks. No definitive evidence has emerged to confirm what, if anything, was in that final car. The tunnels beneath the Owl Mountains remain largely unexplored. Many are unstable, some are still potentially mined, and Polish authorities have restricted access to preserve the sites as historical monuments. The Nazi gold train has become a symbol of how legends grow around historical gaps, how the absence of evidence creates space for speculation. What we know for certain is this: something valuable enough to merit heavy security left Breslau in the final weeks of the war. It entered a region honeycombed with secret tunnels and disappeared from the historical record. Witnesses saw unusual precautions being taken. Decades later, traces of radioactive material appeared in the area, along with Soviet reports of sealed tunnels and dead guards. The gold, if it existed, was probably shipped to Berlin or melted down long ago. But gold is replaceable. The real question is what the Nazis considered so dangerous, or so secret, that it required burial instead of destruction. Whatever was in that final car, it was something they believed the world shouldn't find, or something they hoped would remain hidden until they could return for it. The treasure hunters in Wałbrzych were looking for riches. They found only dirt and disappointment. But maybe that's the train's final secret, that the most valuable things to hide aren't always gold and jewels. Sometimes they're evidence of what people are capable of when they think no one will ever know what they've done. Which brings us back to Andreas Richter's father, the soldier who helped seal the tunnel. He lived for 60 years with whatever he saw in 1945, carrying the secret until his final days. When he finally spoke, he didn't describe treasure or treasure. He said it should stay buried. Sometimes the best thing to do with history isn't to dig it up. It's to understand why someone thought it needed to be hidden in the first place. So, what do you think was in that final car? Was it radioactive material from Germany's nuclear program, biological specimens from SS research, or something else entirely that we haven't considered? Let me know your theory in the comments below. And if you found this story as fascinating as I did researching it, subscribe for more investigations into history's unsolved mysteries. Thanks for watching.